scripture reading tonight comes from the book of John, the 20th chapter. We'll be starting in verse 24 and go through 29. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I won't believe. And after 8 days again, his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then saith he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side. And be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. Jesus saith unto them, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen and yet have believed. You can be seated, please.
Good evening, everyone. I wrote this book, I guess it came out in February, called A Mountain Moving Faith, and I think some people are using it. I actually brought two with me, and so I will sell one book for $10, and I will give a discount for two books for $20. So if anybody wants a book, I will be happy to sign it for you and personalize it. And so if you'd like to have a book, as you know, in Colorado, they have 14,000-foot mountains. They have 58 of them. And so this past summer, I finished climbing the 58 of the 58. And so I have been scolded by my wife for putting my life in danger. I've been scolded by numerous other people. Though the people at church that don't like me were really hoping for the best. But needless to say, I'm still here, and they have been disappointed. I guess we all can't get everything we want in life. A few years ago, there was this fad, I would say, in Christianity, and the fad was that you would have a worship service, and then you had people that would be kind of in the back, and they would have these pieces of cardboard. And on these pieces of cardboard, they would write down various sins that they struggled with, that they had something that was hard for them to overcome. And so they would come and they would walk across up front, and they would stand there, and they would have the cardboard, and it would be called a cardboard confessional. And it would be confessing the sin that they struggled with. But then as they would stand there, they would flip over the cardboard, and then it would be some type of a statement of redemption or forgiveness, that I struggled with anger, but through Christ I found peace. And this was something that was very powerful and emotional that was happening in a lot of our churches. The problem is, seemed so emotional, it seemed so healthy, it seemed so good, but it was kind of a lie. Because there's some things in life that you just can't turn over a piece of cardboard and make it go away. That there's some scars in life, some things that are so traumatic in your life, in your experience, that you can't just flip over cardboard and make it go away. That there's some scars that you will always deal with, and you will always have around you. That there's some sins that are so hard to overcome. There's some traumatic experiences that you can't just forget and move on. They will become a part of you for the rest of your life. We have this text here in John chapter 20, verse 24 to 29. And let's read it here. And we see that Jesus uses scars to declare his glory. Now, Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, We have seen the Lord. But he said to them, Unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." Thomas must be very mean. Maybe he's just rude. Maybe he just doesn't consider, or he has no class. But why would he come to Jesus and want to see his scars? You know the power of a scar. A scar is something that you will never forget. When you receive a scar in life, it is that physical remembrance of something that has happened to you, and you're never going to forget it. You will always recall that experience that happened to you when you look down and see your scar. And so when you see the scar, it brings up and conjures up all the memories of what you have gone through. And so when Thomas comes to Jesus and says, "Jesus, I want to see your scars." And Jesus looks down at his hands, and he sees the scars. And he thinks about being beaten. When he thinks about being spit upon. When he thinks about and he looks down and he sees his hands, and he remembers the crown of thorns that caused the blood to trickle down into his mouth. He remembers, because those scars are a remembrance of what he went through. And so when Thomas comes to him and says, "I'm not going to believe unless I see these scars," is he just mean? Is he that inconsiderate? Because there's some scars in our lives that we want to forget. We want to move past from. The last thing we want to do is have somebody call to our consciousness those memories and those moments that these scars were created. We all know what it's like to share stories of scars. If you ever get a group of men together and then they start talking about it, they start talking about the scar. I remember when I put my hand through a window because my neighbor threw oil in my eyes and I tried to punch him through the window. I remember the scars on my ankles of when the cops chased me on my motorcycle. I remember, and now you all won't remember anything else in the sermon besides that. But every man will sit there and say, "Well, look at my scar. I got a scar here." And they all can tell the story. Nobody ever forgets the story of your scarring. Thomas must not have realized when you bring up that memory, all you're doing is causing Jesus to think about being beaten and whipped, of hanging on that cross. And so when Jesus looks down at his hands, that's what he remembers. Thomas must not have been very considerate, because scars are very symbolic. They mean so much more than just the physical imprints upon your skin. It's a memory. It's an emotion. It's what happened to you. And so when he comes here in John 20, 26 to 27, 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." We typically hide our scars. We hide those things that have brought us low, some of those painful moments in our life. But here is Jesus, and he still has the scars. Now, do you find that quite interesting? Think about the theology behind that. Jesus has a resurrected body. He is given a glorified body, but he still has the scars. Even Easter, Even the resurrection can't remove the scars of sin. And those scars are permanently on his glorified body. The scars of sin are so powerful that even God can't remove them. And so for the rest of eternity, Jesus Christ will bear the scars of mankind and the pain and the suffering that man has demonstrated upon him. Some scars can't be washed away. Some scars always remain. And even if the Son of God still has scars, we in the church need to quit preaching a Pollyanna gospel. Because sometimes we sit back and we say, if you come to Jesus, everything's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to be happy. And no matter what has happened to your life, you are going to forget it and move on. And it's a lie. There are some things that change the very makeup of who we are. There's some events that are so defining that they create character or destroy us. But we can't just forget them. They define us. And if sin defines the Son of God, sin is going to define us as well, and even the sins of others. I don't know about you, but there's something comforting to me in this text. I like having a Messiah that still has scars. Because I can relate to that. Because I still have scars. You still have scars. You have been hurt. You have struggled. You have had wicked things happen to you. And we all try to overcome that. And it's hard sometimes. But I find comfort in knowing that my God still has scars. That he still has those scars. This is what's so powerful about this. That Jesus has these scars. And I wonder when he looks down today at his hands, at his feet, does he remember more than just the scars in the cross? Does he remember why he was placed there? When you think about this, sin is so much more than an action. A lot of times we think sin is just some punctiliar action that happens in a point of time, and then once it's done, it's done. But we know sin's bigger than that, don't we? We know that sin is an emotional process. We know that sin is something that can rest upon you, and the consequences of sin may never go away. And so when you think of Jesus Christ, when he died on the cross and he felt the sins of mankind and he felt the emotions of man, was he there? And does he feel the pain of the wife who just learns of her unfaithful husband? Because that sin is so much bigger than just the action. There's also the consequences for that action. Is it the suffering of the mother who learns of her 18-year-old son who is hit by the drunk driver? And she feels the agony and she weeps that night. Does he feel that sin and the consequence of sin? When we think of Jesus Christ taking the sins of mankind, don't just see it as some mathematical equation. It's an emotional process that happened that only God could take on himself. Does he still feel the nails? We have missed the point when we sing that song. It wasn't about the nails. It was about the wives. It was about the fathers. It was about the children. It was about all those who had to suffer the consequences of sin in our world. That was the pain on the cross. And so when he looks down and he sees his scars, you know he remembers. Because we all remember scarring. This is a picture of Les Ferguson and his family. Some years ago, Paul Buckman was in his house, his wife there, Karen, was caring for their son, Trevor, in the red. Paul Buckman is an evil man. And he came into their house. And all of a sudden, their 5-year-old son comes running out to the neighbors. And he runs up to the neighbor's house, and there's some mothers there, and he yells at them, says, "Please help me. An evil man is trying to hurt my mommy." The two mothers run to the house, and they go in, and there is Paul Buckman with a gun. And you know what Karen Ferguson yells? "Get my baby out of here. Get my baby out of here." Because she knew she was in the presence of evil. And whatever you do, get my little boy out of here. And so they take off and they call 911. But when the authorities come in, Karen and Trevor have been shot. The news report says that when Les learns of it and he comes on the presence, he can't stand up. Because there's some sin that are so devastating that you just don't move past it. You can't tell Les, just forget it. Jesus can heal everything. We'll all be fine. He will always struggle with this. He will never grow past this. But he can take comfort that Jesus has been scarred too. But here's what happens in this account. Here comes Thomas. And Thomas sees this scarring. And this is his response. In John chapter 20, verse 28, Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Now, in this text, you see there's an exclamation mark. In the original language, there's an exclamation mark too. And so he doesn't just say, "My Lord and my God." He yells it. Because all of a sudden, he realizes that this is the Messiah. This is Jesus Christ. But notice what Jesus does. He does something that we don't do in the church today. We hide our scars. We bury our scars. We do everything we can not to talk about them in church. Because they're painful, they're hard, it's yicky, we don't like it. And so we hide our scarring. But Jesus takes his scars and he says, "Thomas, come here and touch this." This is the power of this story. Because Jesus Christ uses his scars to save Thomas's soul. This is what's so powerful. When we as a church start talking honestly and authentically about our scars, and we say, "Hey, I've been scarred too. I've been through difficult times. You have been scarred, I've been scarred." And we start to reveal our scarring to a world that is looking for authenticity and genuineness. All of a sudden, people are starting to come to the church and says, "Hey, this is not a place of fakeness. This is a place who have been scarred too. I fit in here. I belong here because I have scars that I struggle overcoming." And all of a sudden, we're going to have people come because they see that we've been scarred and they can relate. Jesus uses his scars for a redemptive purpose. He uses his scars to save a soul. Why are we hiding away from our scars? We could use our scars to say, "I've been through that too. I know what it feels like. I've experienced that. I made the same mistake, or that happened to me as well. You want to talk? I can stand beside you. I've been there as well. I've been scarred like you." Jesus comes alongside of us and says, I've been scarred, just like you. I still bear the marks of it. Even the resurrection couldn't remove my scarring. That's why I can help you in this situation. He uses this as an opportunity to help them find peace. Because we all have scarring. And the question is, are you going to allow your scar to define you? And allow that bitterness and that pain and that mistake define your character? Or are you going to be like Jesus and find peace through it? He comes and he tells his disciples, I've been scarred, but I offer peace. Peace to you. Because there's something more powerful in a testimony that is greater than anything that the world can offer, which is this. When you have been scarred and you still have peace through Christ, that's a testimony that the world needs to hear and will respect. When you say, I've been hurt, I've been scarred, when I have had difficulties and wicked people inflict pain upon me, I've been there. But I still found peace through Jesus Christ. That was the only healing I could find because God loved me and gave me peace. I had a friend growing up before I was a Christian, and she would tell me about Christianity and the Christian faith, and it all didn't really make a lot of sense to me. It seemed kind of odd. I certainly did not see any validity in showing up to church on Sunday morning when I could be sleeping in. And she would tell me about the faith. But she also told me a story about a man that her father invited into their home, and he wanted to provide a home for this man, to help him out, to be a good Christian man. But the man they invited in was wicked, was evil, corrupt man. And he hurt my friend and abused my friend. And I remember us arguing one day. I said, how can you believe in a God that would allow that? And she said, I have found peace through my faith in God. I think it took me a little while, but I realized something powerful. You still have faith even though you have been scarred. You still trust God even though you've been scarred. I respected that. I believe our whole world will respect this because Jesus takes his scars and saves the world. Christ was scarred for you. Christ was scarred so that you could have peace through him. If that doesn't bring you some level of comfort to know that God is even scarred after the resurrection, you are missing an opportunity to find peace. And so I invite you this evening. This is the Messiah we serve. A Messiah that can't make everything in your life go away. But this is a Messiah that can relate to your life. A Messiah that has also been scarred like you. And you can find peace through him if you will believe, confess, repent, be baptized for the remission of your sins, rise up out of that water to newness of life. And he says, I will walk next to you. And when you have been scarred, he can say, I've been scarred too. So let's do this together. Why don't you do so as we stand and sing the invitation song?